Check. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out and joining us today at this session focused on India's leadership for resource efficiency and circular economy in the renewable energy sector. We'll be talking about both renewable energy and energy storage. My name is Deepak. I am from WRI India. At the recently concluded UNFCCC COP28 in Dubai, countries have agreed to tripling their renewable energy capacity by 2030. India is also accelerating its deployment of RE with an annual 50 gigawatt capacity target to meet the 500 gigawatt non-fossil fuel goal by 2030. Many studies indicate that these technologies are going to generate a large amount of midlife and end-of-life waste, making recycling and reuse critical. We have also seen that there are studies which show that the current way these equipments are manufactured, it is highly material intensive, and only 25% of the current materials that are in use will be recyclable using the existing technologies. Of course, not being able to recycle and letting those materials fester is going to have significant social, environmental, and economic impacts. And therefore, developing a resource efficiency-based framework across the value chain, and it's not just at the stage of installing the project. You need to look at from the mining till the end-of-life phase. There are different stages of this can lead to different opportunities for investors. Currently, of course, the challenges dominate much more than the opportunities. That is, given how we are, our paradigm shift, our paradigm in looking at the sector, in how we are talking about it, how we implement things. That means that the challenges predominate, but how do we convert those into opportunities is what we'll explore in our discussions today. Now, again, as with all things, transitioning to the circular economy itself is expected to generate an additional 4.5 trillion USD in global economic output. But we need to get different parts of the jigsaw puzzle together. It could involve stuff like technical aspects, economic aspects, social aspects, and environmental aspects. All need to come together and fit together to form that perfect solution. Now, notable initiatives which have been led by India or involve India in it are Mission Life, the 11 committees that the government of India has formed to look at transitions from linear to circular economy, as well as the recent G20 under India's presidency, where Resource Efficiency Circular Economy Industry Coalition was announced. We have a stellar panel to take us through these discussions today. I'll call upon the speakers one by one and request you to come on stage when I call out your name. To start off with, Mr. Madhav Pai, the Chief Executive Officer of WRI India, will be moderating the session. He has been the CEO of WRI India since April 2023, and he has played a pivotal role in shaping the strategy, structure, and growth, holding various positions, including Executive Director of the Sustainable Cities Program. Welcome, Madhav. We next have Mr. Rohit Pathak, CEO of Birla Copper. It's part of the Aditya Birla Group, and it is the largest copper player in India and number 3 globally for copper rods outside of China. Number 2, sorry, I stand corrected. So he has been a director on the National Executive Council of AIMA over the 2019 to 2023 period, and is the president of the association for the year 2022-23. Welcome. We next have Mr. Vaibhav Singh, who is the executive director at PricewaterhouseCoopers. He leads the work on clean energy, batteries, and green hydrogen in PwC India. He was the lead author of 2 reports on advanced chemistry battery recycling for Niti Aayog, and has also worked with several state agencies on mandates related to e-waste recycling. We next have Dr. Julie Riviere, who is the country director of GIZ India. She holds an overall experience of more than 4 decades, and for the last 26 years has been associated with the German Development Cooperation in various capacities. She started her professional career in the domain of education, post which she worked as project team leader and advisor to the Ministry of Education of Cape Verde, Africa, and sector coordinator for the German Development Cooperation, and was also an advisor to the Ministry of Education in Mozambique. Welcome, Dr. Julie. We next have Mr. Kunal Saxena, who is Head of Strategic Investments at Ampin Energy Transition. He has more than 14 years of experience across strategy, finance, banking, and operations domains, and has a master's in management finance from ESCP Europe, Paris. Welcome. And Mr. Vivek Sharma, who is the Chief Energy Strategy Group at Adani Energy Solutions. He has over 22 years of experience in the energy and natural resources sector, and currently is the Chief of the Energy Strategy Group at Adani Energy Solutions. In this capacity, he drives strategic planning and management decision support and identification of growth opportunities for all the energy sector businesses of the group. Welcome to all the speakers, and wish you a happy discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Deepak. Welcome once again. Deepak mentioned net zero 2070. Just looking at some of the sort of estimates by 2050. Today India has about close to 200 gigawatts of installed capacity. We use about 280 gigawatts of energy annually. This is going to grow to 1,000 gigawatts at least by 2050. I mean, most of this growth we want to be renewable. This means some 20 times growth in wind, some 20 times growth in solar. We're talking about requiring 8.5 terawatt hours of battery capacity. So I think in this whole context, really, the conversation of resource efficiency, circular economy becomes quite. Just I was looking at some numbers. It says India will produce probably 5 to 6 million tons of solar waste. 10 to 12,000 tons of wind turbines kind of waste, and of course probably close to 150 gigawatts of just battery, and that too just by 2030. So very quickly we really have to move on this journey of really enabling really a market for resource efficiency. Broadly, so maybe I'll start with you, Mr. Rohit. Really, if we are to create a market, right, for really create the ecosystem of number of players working on recycling, resource efficiency, what do you really, from that market side, what do you think can be done to advance this agenda?
Hello? Yeah. So thanks, thanks for the context. So, I'll start by saying, Madhav, look, India was always a circular economy. Our city, our villages and townships were very circular in the way they were set up. Somewhere along the line, as the world globalized and we went to scale, I think no one really thought about circularity, right? The focus was on creating scale, mass production, consumerism of use and throw. The word actually was used very regularly of use and throw. Created a big challenge for the entire world. And now we are suddenly saying, oh, we need to do something about being circular and focus on the environment. Now, in this context, I feel for us in India, this is a fantastic opportunity on 3 counts. One, unlike many parts of the world which are trying to turn green, we have the opportunity to build green. And the economics of how you think of replacement versus new is very different and actually favored in the, or tilted towards the balance on new. Right? So we can create new as we grow. Second, I think at the scale at which India is doing and driving this, I think yesterday and day before we saw in some of the sessions, and I think Prime Minister in his address day before spoke about it, the scale at which we are thinking and doing. We have a fantastic opportunity to take the lead and pole position in this industry of creating green. Third, I think to me, I was very happy to see in our roundtable yesterday with the minister, the government has already started thinking of how do we create a framework and a mechanism to enable recycling in renewables, including solar, where maybe the recycling demand will pick up 3 to 5 years down the line when the first set of solar plants come for either an upgrade or end of life. And we already started to think about it. So I think to me, all these three are lined up very well for the coming years. Now, I think specific to this notion, I think the industry can be very large. All the value creation can be in India, right? So when you talk about or circular economy, the good part is you're starting from something which was valued at zero, maybe even negative, because people had to pay for disposal. From there, you are now creating a full value. So let's say if I look at copper, which we do, the value starts from zero because whoever has bought it has already paid for the whole thing. So you're starting from zero, and from there till the price of $10,000 a ton, which is the current price of copper plus a margin, you are actually creating the entire value in India, right? So I think the value is there today itself. I would say the copper circular or copper reuse, it may not be recycled in the right way, but the copper reuse is probably $2 to $3 billion industry in India already. The challenge for us now is to ensure that it gets channelized in the right way. And as we channelize it, we ensure that the right processing technology to reduce emissions and the quality of the products that come out of this circular economy are up to mark, so that we can reuse it fully for the right purpose. I think that is the real challenge, and I think we are beginning to work on it. It will be tough. It's not going to be easy, but I think we can use the next few years to create this as an ecosystem and make it a economy and a business cycle which can be very, very profitable for everyone in the value chain.
No, thanks. And you talked about 2-3 things, right? You talked about basically that resource efficient is inherent to our culture and our country. You talked about scale and you talked about quality. So maybe reflecting on building on these things, Dr. Julie, maybe if you can sort of talk a little bit about what you see needs to be done in this context of trying to both create scale at quality and really making it an attractive industry to work on, really around resource efficiency of renewables.
I think those elements are all important. It is important to understand the scale that we are dealing with in India. It's important to understand that a lot of new technology is needed, but it's also important to understand that for all of that, you have to have the Indian population behind you. They need to understand what's going on. If they don't understand what circular economy means, they don't need to know about the technology. You have enough bright engineers and people around that understand all of that. But if that narrative doesn't trickle down to the population, to all of these people in India, to all of the states and all walks of life, it's very difficult to really reap the potential. So therefore, I think it is important to come up with a positive narrative, and I have some ideas for that. And secondly, it's also important to think of how that narrative can be implemented. What I see, maybe that's for a second question, I do not know, but what I see is that the whole sector is mainly male-dominated. Even look at this room, look at this panel, no offense. And that the discourse on the topic is so far away from the regular discourse that's happening in the families that we all know leave no one behind. A big section of the population is being left behind. So I think in order to reap the benefits and in order to really leverage the potential of the huge population and the 1 million people getting into the job market every month, 1 million in India onto the job market, no skills, no nothing. There's a huge potential. I think it's really important to think of how to leverage that potential, what to do with it, and how to get to that positive narrative. Because you're totally right, the scale is there, no problem. The technology will be there, that's all no problem. I think with this RE Invest, hopefully the investment will also come. That's also not a big problem. The missions are there. You have wonderful missions in this country, including LIFE. That's also not the biggest challenge. To me, the biggest challenge is how do we get the others that are usually not involved in those discussions into the discussion.
Oh, thank you. I mean, and you touched upon an important point. I mean, women participation in the workforce in India is around 20%, right? And I mean, and I think for us, again, as part of this whole growth, the challenge is to get to 50% women participation in the workforce, and that's so. Thank you for raising that important point. Come to you, Mr. Vivek. Mr. Vivek, I mean, I think you are one of the largest sort of renewable energy company, if you have, and are you already sort of getting to a place where you are getting the scale in terms of sort of what is coming for recycling? Have you actively thought about it? Are you also running into any potential challenges on that front?
Yeah. I will maybe start what Julia mentioned, that the population has to be behind recycling, and it just reminded me of my days in Gurgaon, in a high-end society when the bags, dustbin bags were differentiated, and I was running the RWA, this thing, and it took a lot of time to tell each resident that this is recyclable, this is not recyclable. I agree, but the larger point is on its more business perspective, that if we are thinking of RE transition, we can't do it without thinking it's recycling. Just to give you some number, in India itself, I think CEEW says that 340 kilotons of solar waste will be there, out of which 240 glass can be out. So there are various numbers of each of the thing which could be recycled and reused. To my surprise, Europe is already 95% able to reuse whatever they can. This, in fact, it will become a necessity as a process also. Just think of battery recycling, and this PLI scheme or the policy which has come, it does say that you have to have also assure the plan that there is a recycle plan in it. I don't know whether whosoever visited China and looked at some of the gigawatt factories of batteries, they have a separate recycling unit already. In fact, this will become hazardous. The waste, you have to use the battery, end of the battery life, you have to use, otherwise you'll dump it. So I think the circularity will come naturally also, because it will become a necessity. But also from our side, from our business perspective, we are very clear on the recycling in our Mundra unit. We have already recycling some of the glass from solar panels and other materials. Yes, there's a long way to go, but also, especially if we are thinking of battery, there we can't think of a battery unit without having a recycling unit in it. Challenges are there because there is initial upfront cost which one has to put for doing this. Then there is a lot of technology advancements which to happen to extract maximum from that. Right now, the cost break-even between, say, normal, because the prices have come down for a battery, LFP, versus the cost of recycling, I think that also need to somewhere get addressed. From government side, I have a sense that they will also look at this under the PLI scheme, the way I've looked at other, for encouraging manufacturing, they need to encourage recycling. It will be the next part to it to complete the circularity.
Mr. Kunal, I think, I'll ask you the financing question, but, Mr. Vivek briefly touched upon it. Feel free to, if you have any thoughts also, please share. But also curious on if you, from a financing perspective, to get this really going, right, beyond PLI, any other ideas that, that should be considered to really get this market going? Any thoughts?
Basically, when it comes to recycling, I'll just share my thoughts just to build the background. So India would require approximately, given the 2070 net zero target, India would require around 5,000 gigawatt of solar to reach 2070. Also, if you consider how much of green hydrogen we would produce and what is our target, and also when you convert all the fuel vehicles into electric vehicles by 2040, 45, 50, whatever, you require huge amount of, a number of solar panels will be in a large amount, right? So definitely, as he said, that will be natural to us that we should get into that. Now there are two challenges. One is the technology. Now for many things we don't have technology, right? For example, we don't have industrial equipment manufacturing, we don't have robotics manufacturing. So these technologies can be brought in. So apart from the PLI, what government can do, and the government should step up, right? So and say, hey, we understand that these things may not have economies of scale as of now, or may not have economies of scale by 2030 also. We are stepping up. Either we give grants to, or we give special financing for these projects if the private players are coming up, or we ourselves would be willing to get the technology from Europe, do a good handshake with diplomatic handshake, and get the technology to India. And like for example, PSU, the big PSUs can step up and actually make the technology indigenous. That would really help, and that financing can be under special sector financing. So that will go a long way. That will be the government sector solution.
No, that's a great suggestion. I think, and clearly, I think beyond PLI, I think just how do we do that at scale? Maybe we can talk about it a little more. Well, just quick question to you really is on the mandate side, right? I mean, I think what do you, I mean, so far what we have seen is some basic mandates on solar inverters, solar panels, very early days. But what do you think should be done on, do you think anything should be done on mandate regulation at this point of time? Should we wait? And then, is BE the right place to do it? So just any thoughts on, on that?
Sure. A very pertinent question. The way I would want to answer is to give some background in terms of why that's needed. So if you look at reuse and recycling broadly, it's driven by a few imperatives. From a battery standpoint, for example, you have these large-scale volumes that are coming up. So Kunal talked about the volume that's coming up through renewable integration where batteries are needed. You also have mobility that's going to be contributing large volumes, and you also have appliances. The estimate is, if you look at all of these three segments, and only for batteries, so for batteries alone, the end of life volume is going to be close to 700,000 tons by 2030. With some optimism, it may also be close to 1 million tons by 2030. So that's a significant battery volume that would have to be reused or disposed of. The second imperative happens to be the manufacturing industry that requires raw material or these critical minerals. And the very need is amplified by the scarcity of these minerals here in India. So for manufacturing to be competitive, to be viable in the first place, those volumes would have to be there. And recycling eventually has to feed into those. The third and most important is manufacturing scrap. So if we look at, for example, battery manufacturing, we have plans under PLI, almost 50 gigawatt hour would be an allocation. Outside of PLI also there are units coming up. So overall manufacturing volume is going to be close to, for example, 100 gigawatt hour by 2030. If you take a reasonable scrappage, so for a stable manufacturing, if you take 5%, that's 5 gigawatt hour of annual scrappage that you will have. Which would have to be probably reused or recycled to feed into the manufacturing once again. So this provides an evident need for this recycling to be there, and that takes me to this question, what more needs to be done to ensure that this is getting reused and recycled. So I find there's scope for a lot to be done. For example, standardization. If I talk about standardization, one is standardization in terms of uh, we've looked at standardization for products. There is also standardization needed to have dismantling, not free, but rather dismantling friendly batteries that should be there, which makes it safe for recyclers to also dispose of them. Second, there has to be standardization for reuse also. So you're going to be having a lot of these battery volumes coming in. Now, currently, the base for recycling is electronic waste. So majority of the recyclers that you visit, you realize majority of the waste that they're recycling is coming in from cell phones, from laptop batteries, from drones, and so on and so forth. Now, eventually, that's getting shifted to electric vehicle end-of-life batteries. But all of these cells that are coming up, they're not homogeneous. They're all from different chemistries, different form factors, different compositions, different shapes and sizes. So that makes a need for example, standardization of these, so that if you have different performance characteristics coming up, you segregate them, and you segregate them in a manner that if you are going to reuse it for some other end application, these are very homogeneous so that it lasts longer before they come to end of life. There is also need for regulations to be there. Vivek talked about PLI, where there is a specific mandate for domestic value addition. Now, domestic value addition, which would mean value addition that happens through domestic manufacturing, also any sourcing that you do locally. And sourcing that happens locally also includes recycling volumes that could come locally. So that adds to a value addition, leads to a higher incentive that a manufacturer would obtain. So these sort of initiatives throughout the industry have to happen more to ensure that it's a thriving industry. More so, and the most exciting part is, if you look at the recyclers, what excites me more is these recyclers are mostly all startups. So if you look at the largest recyclers, Atero, Exico, Loham, Betex, these are all startups. So a lot more has to happen, but I'm really optimistic about this industry.
Thank you. No, actually, so really on that, I mean, one actually, Kunal touched upon basically the idea of robotics. So I mean, as a large company, I think what kind are you sort of adopting some of those strategies? And then, yes, if you
No, so Madhav, before answering that, I just want to build on what Julie said. I think absolutely critical for us to get the masses involved, right? And but I think to me, 3 points I thought which are pertinent. If you look at, let's say, I think first part of the involvement is information, right? And how we communicate the value of what people have. 10 years ago, if you went, if I asked people, people may not have known. But today, if you ask anyone, they may not know their bank balance, but they will know how much of data balance they have left on their phone, right? Everyone, no matter how educated or how, which section of society they come from, they will know the data balance on their phone. I think that kind of awareness is possible if you do it in the right way of saying, what is the scrap that you have that can be reused. Right? Second, I think India has cracked the delivery side of a very fragmented set of players very well, right? Where they, in terms of taking even a 10 rupee product to a home is possible in the Indian ecosystem, right? So that mechanism of one way to the customer has been established. I don't think it will be a complex thing if we really get to it to do the reverse, right? Because that's what you're really looking for in terms of collecting of the waste. The third part, I think what Vivek was also saying, the challenge in that is that person who's collecting, and it's not as if the collection is not happening, right? Whether it's from a society, whether it's from the municipal corporations, collection is happening. The problem is the person who's collecting and the person who's giving has no clue of that value of that material he's giving, right? Now let's say if copper today is 600 rupees a kg. I'm just using copper, or let's say e-waste which will have gold and silver is probably even more per kg. Now let's assume the consumer who is now throwing it away knows and takes it as an investment, like we do in companies. You buy an asset. In companies, it is a value which gets depreciated, but at the end of life also there is value of that asset. Now, if that individual consumer knows that value of the asset, there is no way they will leave that value. They will ensure it goes, even if they have to walk 10 minutes to drop it somewhere, they will do it if they know the value is there. The problem today is that the sector today of collection of scrap is very informal, very unorganized, and is a cash economy. right? So it doesn't come into the regular system, and that's why the incentive to give it in the right place is not there. I think this can, if we do this right, we can transform this whole collection process into a value creating thing. Think of when you buy jewelry, you don't look at it as expenditure, you look at it as an investment because of the value of that asset. If I'm buying copper wires for my house, why should I look at it as it's a appreciating asset? Because copper value will go up, right? So it's actually an appreciating asset. And if you start looking at it that way, this will flow into the system very, very conveniently. So I think we have to design the system well and the taxation policies well so that people are encouraged to bring it back in a formal way into the system.
I think the narrative question is, I'll ask Dr. Julie, I know you also have to leave early, but yeah, if you, I mean, you two questions and you can add to this also. One is really, so, from your experiences around the world, I mean, this narrative question, I mean, what are your thoughts on how that can be done? And really, I think beyond that, any other strategies also around really driving this whole sort of recycling into a mainstream sort of consciousness. So yeah, if you can share some thoughts on that.
Super valid points, by the way, super valid. We have been working in Gurgaon exactly in those high rises, and I can tell you the challenges, oh my God. Some people wouldn't do it. It took a long time. They had their mates doing it. They would not answer the doors. We had marshals. We tried. Anyway, it is a challenge, and that, as we, I think, have all agreed to, is part of the problem to get from A to B. The positive narrative. We have life. And I think life is one of to me, it's my favorite mission. Life is really, really good and came at the right time. I think life needs to be promoted much more than it is. It was promoted a while ago during G20, but I think that is super important because it links so many elements of the Indian history, culture, or whatever, so you can really get the population with those principles. I think life is a jewel. It really is. Big khazana. It is super. There's so much in there. Secondly, the narrative needs to be positive. Many of you probably have been in those material recovery centers. And let me tell you, that is an interesting experience. I have seen quite a few around the country. And number one, it is interesting to see who is working there. Secondly, what you find there. Thirdly, you have to be ready for it in terms of the smell and the heat and everything else. So then I always ask myself, who wants to do this kind of a work? And how are we going to get to all of our wonderful 500 gigawatts? Because that is part of it. You have lots of migrant workers, Indian migrant workers. Nobody really wants to do it. However, we have also people with bachelor's degrees working in those material recovery centers because you don't find anybody else. So if people think about recycling and circular economy and all of that, they think about those garbage collectors. They think about the smell associated with it. They think about the unpleasantness of the whole thing. So that needs to go away, and it needs to be replaced with a positive narrative. And the positive narrative would include talking about life and how life is so important for our one life. Ye hamara zindagi hai, sirf ek zindagi hai, yeah, not 2 and 3 and 4. It is now this one zindagi, and that is already in life. We just need to use it, okay? Then, if you really want to have that zindagi, you have to have clean water, clean air, everything needs to be clean, it needs to be green. So therefore, this whole new generation understands that easily, and they can influence their parents. They must influence the parents. So you have to get that narrative also into schools. The teachers need to talk about it. The children have to go home and need to tell their parents, you need to start segregating. I insist on it. If they don't do it, you lose the plot. Yeah? So the children need to be in it. number one, in order to get their parents who are not doing it to also do it, and to wake up. Now, with that positive narrative, namely that everything that we throw away, there is so much that can be recovered, that can be recycled, that can be refurbished, including batteries. I mean, yeah, first of all, the batteries we use in the household, but other things. They need to understand that the materials that we have are not endless. We cannot continue mining and taking everything out of this one earth that we have, this one earth, and then it's gone, and then what? Yeah? So therefore, we have a responsibility to really spread that message to stop this mining and start recycling and refurbishing and repurposing. So the first batteries are coming to an end because the first life cycle is apparently 8 years. It's coming to an end soon, and there's a huge potential and huge money to be made. So what do we do with all of those students in school? They need to understand that there's a huge market. They need to get training for it in green skills or become engineers so that they can go into those sectors that are necessary in order to drive this whole thing forward. So the market is there, the missions are there, hopefully the understanding will be there, but investment needs to happen not only into technology, it needs to happen into those teachers, into the curricula, into all of this, for this narrative to really grab, because if not, it will not trickle down. So if the new generation knows, and even the entrepreneurs, the startups, that there's a whole lot of money to be made with this narrative of life and clean energy and this one earth and this one zindagi and all of that, then I think we have a super good narrative, which is not difficult. The pieces are all there. We just have to go and collect the pieces. I'm coming back to the investment. You probably know that 2 days ago, Honorable Minister Yoshi and our German minister launched the renewable energy platform, India-Germany. So the two countries are totally committed to reach 500, for India to reach 500 gigawatt in 2030. So it is not only for India and Germany, that platform, it is for the whole world. So it is for all of us to pull up our socks and really go out and try for people to think about the narrative, to get organizations, countries, philanthropists to invest into the technologies, but also into the people to drive the whole movement forward. And this is why I think one of the deliverables of this conference is really this platform. We now have to populate it, we have to make it work, because in it are the missions, like LIFE, in it are the technology, in it are all the investors that came. So many investors who have really an interest to come to India in order for their own value chains back home, wherever that might be, to also be indigenous, if you know what I mean. So India has a motivation for having indigenous value chains, but other countries also have an interest. And since India is a super good country to, with all the people there and all the technology and the motivation, the same objective as others have, it's a country where investment can happen. So that would kill so many birds with one stone, and this is what this platform is for. So I would encourage all of you to think of what can be done with that narrative and with that platform, because the pieces are there, the motivation are there, and all of you are ambassadors for the topic. And then don't forget the women.
Thank you very much. Do you want to add anything further? I mean, if not, I mean, I have a specific question for you, but if there's something see, I mean, one, I was really curious also. I mean, Kunal really spoke about this point of really triggering this robotics manufacturing, industrial manufacturing. How do we do that where it's also available to smaller startups, etc., to experiment and create new products beyond just sort of, the PLI is still targeted, all of it, to a large, I mean, how do we get this whole startup ecosystem going? And
I think one of the challenge which as a country we, even for transiting to RE, even though we have targets, we have commitments to do, is the supply chain. And I will give an example of say robotic cleaning, say solar panels we are using just to use less of water and efficiency overall. But there is a certainly limitation within India, the manufacturing ecosystem to do that. And we can say we don't want to depend on China, but at this stage there's still a lot of dependency is there for some time, especially for the technology transfer. We have moved ahead quite a bit on the solar manufacturing side. We reached today at the stage where we have in-house modules, we have cell manufacturing, but there also upstream we still need to go. In the entire piece, I think the manufacturing ecosystem, whether for robotic, we need to initially may allow some of the technology transfer to smoothly happen in India. We can definitely re-engineer and do later on whatever best we can do. Like I've again given an example of solar, because still the cost curves are high, but the technology for recycling will also have a similar issue. Germany, Europe has some of the countries do have good technology who are using already successfully. But as I mentioned, technology transfer and the cost both will become a little more imperative. But my sense is, as Julie also mentioned, since it is the requirement and the scale will be so much, I do see the cost won't be a concern and the technology will eventually move, or people will learn or make some technology. One, India, I would say, as historically has been suffered on the R&D side. We are not a country with the appetite to do R&D. And last decade or 5 years still there is some degree of focus has been there. But this is something we think, R&D is investment. Oh no, why will do an investment? There's no return. There are people to feed. So we never ever thought that how important the R&D is. And it's completely different in China. So there is a lot of spend happens in R&D and they get, bumper later on. But that's cycle we have not done, but okay, that's being the history. But a lot of need to be done continuously in terms of technology also, as Weber mentioned about the standardization, design. There are a lot of stuff need to be done before we actually get into that. Even for that matter, India is a big country. We are talking of EV. We've never talk of standardization of battery there also. If we start from there, the end product, how we actually recycle will be more easy. Today we are talking of frankly of recycling, especially it came from the fact that batteries are there. Because we know there is a safeguard and there is an issue of what we'll do after it. But I have not seen any forum discussing about solar panel being actively to be there. This has become because of battery, this discussion has started happening. Whereas
just a question, since and then this silicon, are there other uses for silicon? Today it's being burnt, right? Are there other uses for silicon? How do we create a market?
Silica itself is a semiconductor industry, it depends on silica. Solar, of course, is to some extent.
No, once you've used the panel, then are there any uses of that, or is there a market for that?
So basically silicon is used, like for example in solar panels, if you have extracted silicon, right? So if you go backward into the value chain, so for wafers you need quartz crucible, so that is also quartz, right? So silicon is nothing but quartz, like if the lowest usage is that. Now silicon, that is a very high purity silicon. If you can recycle it, that is used in electronics, as he mentioned, that electronics is a little higher grade polysilicon, which is 11N or 12N polysilicon. Like when you add 99.999, so how many nines you have, that is the N number of polysilicon, the purity number. That electronics grade has a little bit higher, but that can be used. And again, it can be circled back to manufacture a module.
Maybe, the only thing that it won't give the equal number, because silica, if you do recycle the numbers or whatever has been done, it doesn't give the same number. It gives maybe 20% of that. But that itself is decent number to look at. See, the point is that if you look at this earth, we were actually surviving on either agriculture or what is there in the earth was water. Historically, it was agriculture, water. Now we started mining. So all the even green transition is green. One can debate to an extent, but it depended heavily on the earth material, whether it is copper or other material. We have to start thinking to limitation of that, and also the fact what we will do of that waste, and also how we can give back. So this potentially has to be done, and I think somewhere right now the issue clearly is in terms of what is the recovery technology, what we'll use, and what will be the cost of that. So that's the only concern which I foresee. I said that in the stack of the packing order, I would say battery will be certainly something India will do for sure, and maybe we should become a hub. The estimate is that 30% of our battery requirement can come within from us.
I just want to say one thing and then I have to go. I would really like to underline the skilled workforce that we need. If we don't move on that with investments and with an understanding that that is needed, we also will not move as fast as we should. I give you one example. Solar panelists and curricula are out. ITIs are trying, the Green Energy Council, they all try. Would you believe that the seats are not even filled? That the students are not even coming? It starts there. Trainers are there, the equipment is there, classroom is there, curriculum is there, master trainers are there, students are not there. This is where we are. So if we think about all of these solar panels and everything, fine, but how do we even get people to put them together if they are not even coming for the training? So again, that positive narrative and that workforce and all the potential that we have, we really have to leverage. We have to do something about it. It needs all of us, and we will do it. It will happen.
No, and,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Julie. And it's not just an energy transition; it's a people, climate, and nature transition. Thank you. I know we would have ideally loved to have you spend more time, but thank you so much. I request Dr. Rana to please hand over a memento.
Looks like it. So let's carry on. So,
No, so I think one point of which I want to just build on is, see, historically, last 20-30 years, India has by and large been a follower, right? So we've been trying to catch up. When you're catching up, your focus on R&D can never be there. Okay. Now you're getting into a position where we are likely to be leading. And I think once we get that vision clear and that communication clear on where we are, I think the R&D will happen. I'll just give you an example. While we're talking of circular economy, let's say we do aluminium and copper in Hindalco. Until 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, for every ton we would be generating waste which is probably 2-3 times of what we produce, right? But that comes in the ore that you start processing, and it would go into landfills. Today we are in a position where we are not adding anything to landfill in most of our plants. By 2030, as Hindalco, we will be zero waste to landfill, right? That's a huge difference. And for that, the R&D has happened in India. What we did with Red Mud, which is a global issue. India is the first country which is using Red Mud into productive use, right? And same in copper, we have now developed where in a year or so, we will stop 1% of what we were putting into our landfills will come down to 99% will go away, only 1% will go to landfill. Right? That's the delta that can be done, and research will happen because it's a need. So I think the gap we are trying to face is, I think we are beginning to build this scale, and I think if we can throw out those challenges and the opportunity, and like Julie said, if people know this is going to be a big industry, I think both employ youth to work as well as startups and small scale MSMEs who will want to work in this area will happen, and R&D will also happen. But I think we have not been communicating enough. We have not been telling what the opportunity is so that people can begin to redirect themselves there.
And just one more question to you, Rohit. I mean, we talked a little bit about women participation. Are you actively doing anything to sort of drive that agenda? And if you can share, I think that.
No, so look, in all our plants and, in fact, from here, if I look at the Hindalco team, half the Hindalco team is women, which are here, right? So I think, both at the plant level, at the, in our different teams, the women participation is increasing almost 30-40% every year, right? So that's a conscious effort that we are doing, and many other corporates are doing. I won't say we are the only ones. A lot of people are focusing on. I think even in this whole ecosystem of scrap, right, and the circular economy, I think women can play a very important role. The problem we have today, which we have to solve for, is if you look at today, the person who's generating the scrap either gets zero or pays for the scrap collection. The person who's collecting it, right, many of them, by the way, are women today in most of the societies, they get hardly even daily wage. Okay? Maybe 1 or 2 levels after that collection also, the value add and the value that people get is very low. Somewhere in the middle, then there's a unorganized, like in the old, we used to talk about agricultural system, and you had the arthiyas who were the middlemen, we used to as call, right? Where all the value gets captured in the informal economy, right? That, I think we have to ensure that that trickles down in a formal way to this point at source and the first collection. The moment you start doing that, I think you can enable and create, huge, and India can do it. If you look at 5 years down earlier, when you went in a train in India, the person who was attendant in the train had no dignity. Right? Today, if you go in a Shatabdi or a Vande Bharat or any of these trains, when you go and see what those people are doing, you can see pride. They are reasonably well paid, they are well dressed, they are given respect. That whole profession has changed. And we can do it as scale. This is not just, it didn't just happen. It was a proper focused effort. I remember one of my ex-McKinsey colleagues, Adil, was leading that effort. And they took all the attendants through a proper training program, rebranded, and it was an effort which is done. I think same we can do at scale in some of these sectors, and I think we can create that. So I think it's possible to be done. We need to now, maybe it was probably a low-down priority a few years ago. Now we are getting to a scale where this can be brought into the forefront, and we can consciously work on this as a theme.
Thanks. Let me see if there's 1 or 2 questions in the audience, and then maybe somebody can take the mic there. Deepak, take a mic. Yeah, just let's take 2 questions, and then we can come back and maybe respond to the questions also close. Yeah, just take both. No? Both.
Myself, Mayur Karmarkar, International Copper Association. In the entire circular economy system, if you see the engagement of stakeholder, large corporates are already working on that, largely in the metal sector. Central government, yes, but the role of state government is still not visible at the moment. I will give one example. On the metal assets, all distribution companies are spitting on huge piles of the metal assets. But if you really go through the balance sheets and you see the asset valuation, it's far, far lower than the salvage values of those metal assets. Now, once these balance sheets also gives the right salvage values, I think the circular economy will get a huge boost in the government sector.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I am H. Kumar from Rajasthan. I came from Rajasthan. My friend says about the circular about the youth. In the most of the India, youth are there. Why not put up some capacity building circular economy program? Because this is the main source of our economy, of Indian economy. Second is, we have a one word one sun, one guild, wanted to create the one district, one sun, one word, one guild, one district, and one village also. So the whole country can be get the net zero target.
Any, just the state government question, anybody wants to respond? And if you want any closing comments, so maybe because, we're not, we have we have 20 minutes. Okay, that, but 11, but go ahead. So the question you can respond, but if you have any other thoughts also, and then maybe we can
No,
move on.
so basically my thoughts is mainly, what Dr. Julie spoke, what Mr. Rohit also spoke about. So, if I put this in a framework, so, in our B school, there used to be a PESTEL framework, political, environmental, social, technological, economical, and legal, right? So, P and D, we are aligned. I think environmentally, we all know we are all aligned. Politically, we are all aligned. Socially, as what they spoke is the S part, the social part, that they should be aligned. So there needs to be a narrative, there needs to be marketing about it, and right from the school, right from, like, they have spoken about it. So S has to be addressed well. And what I spoke about was T, the technology thing. So, like, if you take a simple example of solar panel, there are some things which are easily recyclable and some things which are difficult to recycle, right? For example, glass. For example, you have cells where silicon is there and you can extract silver out of it, you can extract aluminum out of it. But solar panel has POE, polyolefin, which is EVA and backsheet. So EVA is cross-linking polymer is there. It is not a thermoplastic. It cannot be recycled so easily. EVA backsheet cannot be recycled so easily. Junction box has silicons. It cannot be recycled so easily. So basically, if we segregate, if we go about it step by step, what can be recyclable, where the technology already exists, do we have that technology? If the answer is no, we should handshake with Europe, get the technology in. It can be a government project and municipal bonds can be floated against it, right? So, like, the municipalities, they also keep doing their funding. So that financing is separate under special category financing, first to address what is addressable. And then come to the difficult part, which is EVA, backsheet, junction box, how to reset them, because those would be complicated technologies. So we have to address T in a very systematic manner. And then L, legal. Legally, they should, the government should come up with the regulations that was, these type of circularities should be there in your plant, manufacturing plant, and we should know where the buck stops. The buck stops at the developer, or the buck stops at the manufacturer, or the buck stops at the component provider. For example, whoever supplied EVA backsheet to you may not be you, may not be the manufacturer, may not be the developer. It has come from China. So, like, where does the buck stop and where you should put the legal regulation? That is the third thing. And on economics, once you have these many solar panels to address, to recycle, you will have large problem of yourself, which so with 1.5 billion population, we'll try to address and we'll address it. That becomes solution. And the other, in China, in Europe, where the installations are happening, the same problem of theirs can be solved here. So when we collectively, if we are doing the collective problem solving, we come at scale, and then economics will kick in.
No, that's good. Yeah.
If I can just add to the point, if you look at recycling, at the end of the day, it's a business. Now, as that businessman, what a recycler is doing is, for example, setting up that entire manufacturing facility, putting in that capex, getting raw material for which they are paying, and at the end of the day, they are recovering something. And the value of the recovery has to justify that business. Otherwise, something in form of an incentive has to come in. Now, if we, for example, look at recycling, it may not make sense for each and everything with only the volume that's getting generated out of end product. So, for example, when Kunal spoke about solar, you get aluminum, you get silver, copper, other things. So you'll have to see whether the volume that's coming out, it's making sense for you or not. If I take the case for battery, so for example, if it's NMC, you put that in, you get lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt. So for various such products, the volume of the end product justifies making in that investment. So for NMC, it definitely does. If you look at other, for example, batteries like LFP, the end volume that comes out of it, probably at this point of time does not justify that. So businesses would have to evolve that way. Now, in LFP, what businesses are probably doing is, they are connecting directly with giga-scale manufacturers to provide cathode active material or anode active material, which could justify that. Now, with these sort of products wherein it may not make sense economically, EPR would have to be kicked in on a larger scale, so that if the volume alone, the value alone does not justify it with EPR certificates, with the volume coming in, the business could make sense. And that takes me to another point, that is in terms of the extent to which recovery is happening. If we look at the current recyclers, so for e-waste there may be 500 plus recyclers already registered. But if you look at how many of those are recycling end-to-end to the last mineral to a great refining value, so that would, for example, batteries is only 10. So these recyclers would have to start also recycling end-to-end. Many are currently only, for example, crushing it and getting black mass. But recovering lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt requires much more R&D, requires a larger scale for that to happen. This takes me to the final point on this subject, which is the capacity building and the role of stakeholders in this. So there is a role for everyone in there. For example, if we talk about government agencies, so there have been various case studies, for example, in Odisha, where waste collection happens door to door. There has been Indore that presented good case for waste segregation and collection. So these are certain examples on the collection side. On the incentive side, there's a lot that can happen on specifically incentive that could be offered for capex investment for recyclers. There can also be incentives. There can also be other ease of regulations. For example, recycling currently is, red category, red zone areas only are allowed for recyclers to be setting up their operations in. So even if it happens to be a zero discharge facility, so some norms can be looked at, and some norms can be lightened a bit to ensure that larger volume can come in. And then in the offtake part, as I mentioned, tie-ups, R&D, larger scale, that probably is a role that industry would have to play in.
So, I'll just add one. I think probably the biggest roadblock in some of this that I see, especially given a lot of talk is around batteries, is we have a tough challenge on how we look at China. Okay. The reason I say that is the prices at which China is creating and selling material. I don't know, and no one really knows the cost of their real production. Mm-hmm. We only know what they sell at. It is so low that the incentive for anyone to do anything on their own is zero, right? If you talk to anyone, the first choice will be, if you can get it from China, get it from China. Mm-hmm. Right? Because they have the scale, they give you at the right price. Now, if you get stuck in that, all the products that you are getting will come from China, will be designed in China. You will not know, and you will have zero influence on how it can be recycled. Mm-hmm. Right? And the technology for recycling, China may develop, but they may give you, may not give you, may give you later. We don't know, right? So we have to figure out how will we as a country, even if, so I'm not saying you can stop China. I think the world is dependent on China, so we will have to keep getting things from China. But how do we create that right incentive for people in India to do that R&D and develop and get to scale is an important element. Only then we can design products which can be recycled. So for example, one of our businesses, the epoxy business of Aditya Birla Group, a couple of years ago had developed and created a recycle mine, which is an epoxy which can be recycled. So now we are able to make blades, wind turbine blades, which can be fully recycled. Okay, that happened because we developed a technology in India of the products. Right? Now, how do we get to scale? How do we take it to the common applications is where the next challenge is. So I think that the India, China, how we balance this need to buy to get to immediate scale, at the same time create development in India, which is product development, is I think the balance we'll have to really create if you have to design for recycling and circular economy. Right? Today we are focusing a lot on how do we recycle whatever we have bought, but we are not designing for recycling today. And that we need to also emphasize.
Yeah, and I think that maybe that's the second question. I think a lot of things have emerged of what you want to do immediately, right? What requires some medium-term thinking and what requires slightly long-term thinking. So, is there some kind of policy making that can also sort of help with that kind of sort of?
I think what Rohit mentioned, I also mentioned the same, that the China dependence and that balancing thing will be required, because what we are getting right now, we're not sure of how we'll recycle the cells and how much we get out of it. And Vaibhav also mentioned that there has to be some, end of the day, it has to make commercial sense. If you're able to get only aluminium, and we are also doing that, aluminium or silver, how much silica is it worth? So, all those questions comes when you put any investment. I think what's happening to be also fair to us as Indians, we have done pretty good in last decade. I would say the PLI scheme and some of the manufacturing in India is from day one well planned. He talked about copper. We also have copper. We also, in terms of landfill, everything we are on the same track. In fact, competing with China on how much, say, silver pasting will use by making panels, or how much polysilica we use for per unit. All these trajectories are quite similar to China. So the usage side itself, I thought we are going to talk about resource usage and recycling. Usage side also, we have become very, very efficient. We're becoming efficient. And since, as Rohit mentioned, we know what we are mining or what we are producing, say in this case of module solar. So we have some thought what we can take out from it, from a recycling process. Wind blades, yeah, it's very much doable. It is something happening. Battery, I'm saying the ecosystem itself will call for that, and there's a fair point. I also never thought about what Kunal mentioned, that who will be the responsible entity. Even though the PLI scheme says that the manufacturer need to have something on the recycle front, but I'm not sure once the battery is sold, how it will come back to him on his own.
So that I'll mention. I mean, I have been also studying e-rickshaws, for example, right? E-rickshaws have happened, right? India is now close to 2 million e-rickshaws, which is, and all of them use lead acid batteries.
Yeah.
And because how they charge them and all of this, these batteries don't last more than 6-8 months. So today we have a 4 million lead acid battery market that is just for e-rickshaws.
Lead acid is there, this mobile batteries, all these things you can see.
So even these things, I mean, and this is nothing to do with China, this is a very sort of domestic problem, but it is a logistics and sort of, I mean, so something like this, how would we tackle this? And not just from your perspective, but how should we tackle? Is there a way to think about, how do we create incentives? How do we create startups to be able to drive this agenda? Just some thoughts on that.
I think I mentioned about the incentives. I think all your manufacturing I am visualizing that this will be a compulsory thing. Buck stops where maybe could be answered how it is to go back, but the unit of manufacturing itself will have a recycling unit. As I said, I have visited China. We have few pictures also I could have shared that they have the recycling unit along with the entire battery platform. This is in the last there is recycle. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is taken out from the factory. All is put there and recycled. Nothing, and plus they get back whatever has been after 6 years, 8 years. Now the life probably is going to increase, so it comes back to them very systematically.
So there have been some examples specifically for the battery passport that's there in Europe. So that's a good example for the entire tracking to happen once the end of life was achieved, and after it, how recovery happened. An Indian equivalent of that is Battery Aadhaar that's being worked upon. Although there are still a lot of complications there. For example, you can have it for batteries, but each and every cell, how it would be tagged. So there's still a lot of differences there that would have to be ironed out. But if I have to present a wish list, the wish list is, we talk about within this session, for example, circularity. So we have discussed a lot about recycling. You do it, you get minerals at the end of it. You use it for whichever purpose, you get the most value out of it. But eventually, refining to that extent has to happen that it can go back to that same industry. For example, if it's batteries, let's say you recover nickel, manganese, cobalt. Currently, for example, lithium would go a lot into pharma, graphite would go a lot into, say, tires, cobalt, for example, ceramic, other usages also. But what's not happening is that mineral is currently not going back again to battery manufacturers. That would happen with more and more refining that they do. But yeah, that ideally is the wish list that we should target for.
Just one question also. I mean, I think we talked, I mean, batteries, we keep talking about, lithium ion, LFP. Are we seeing any other sort of battery, technologies, and which do you think, are you think, is there even a conversation of that, or that's still like, it's a possibility, but still in the air? Just any reflections?
No, so I think a lot of different technologies are being tried, which will scale up and be economically possible. We don't know. For example, there is vanadium, there is aluminum air, which some people are working on. There is obviously the sodium ion, which is trying to thing. So enough work is happening. Which one will finally succeed? I think even world doesn't know. I think there is a big debate still going on which way it will go. As of now, it's all in the creation phase, in my view.
At this stage, certainly LFP is going to stay for some time. That's the sense, and maybe will be a version of within LFP, which may add up just to improve the cycle or the efficiency, or maybe NFP later. I don't know.
No, LFP has taken the route because China has built huge scale and is able to give both quantities and price points which are making things economical, right? Now, hence tipping this scale is going to be very difficult for anyone. Same with solar, by the way. Solar panel didn't start from China, but the way China built its scale, whatever is being deployed globally is still based is what China had developed, right? So I think that's that's what we'll have to figure out how to crack and get out of. Otherwise, we will always be trying to catch up with China. That I think is the challenge. See, China, even in batteries, is not something new. I remember in early 2000s when I used to go to China for auto work. At that point, if you spoke to anyone in Chinese industry, they would say, guys, we are probably never going to be catching up on the ICE engines, diesel, petrol, but we will lead in EVs. In mid 2005-6, I'm saying. Right? Since then, they have been working on developing and creating that ecosystem. Right? So I'm sure as we talk now, when we're talking of batteries, they have thought through the next 10-15 years of what they want to do. The world we will not know. So we'll only see events as they unfold.
No, but anyway, what are those bets we can make? But maybe Kunal, after
So when we were talking about battery, so what the Mr. Rohit and Vivek spoke about was on the cathode side. Yeah, there are things on anode side also. So instead of graphite, they are doing silicon. So like one of the questions was previously, if I extract the silicon, where is it going to be used? So if the anode becomes silicon, then that has a usage in battery as well.
Yeah.
See, definitely China has democratized technology for the world, right? So they have it. It all depends on how much focus you put in one technology. For example, on ICE engines, like during 1890 and 1900, a lot of R&D went into it. From 1900 until 1950, there were world wars and the metals got developed. And because the metals got developed and IC engines gained more traction and they could withstand more heat. So basically a lot of R&D went into it. It is all about how much focus and R&D you are putting into one thing. As he said, LFP, because they put in a lot of R&D on that, because they put in a lot of scale on that. So scale plus R&D plus they have capital which supports that type of investment. You need to have patient capital. Yeah. So China plays the capital game very differently. The currency game is played very differently in China. Yuan versus dollar is not floating as we think INR versus dollar floats. Yeah, they control that thing. So it becomes a circular symbiotic economy between US and India, US and China, that China exports, dollar comes in, they have $3 to $4 trillion of treasury, they put the dollar back, they give the dollar back to the US for some 1% or for whatever is the bond rate, converting that green back into yellow back, and then they in turn lend this to the population, which again import Chinese goods. So basically the scale comes from export and managing their capitalism. So the one very important puzzle in this is like, where is the capital? So you need to have that type of, that quality of capital into the invest. So until now, India has been seeing infrastructure developments. Since we got freedom, we focused on infrastructure, road, bridges and all. That is a different type of capital. That is infrastructure capital, right? So that runs for 25 years, those are concessionary assets. On R&D, because we never did that good an R&D, or that deep an R&D, because anyway, law of comparative advantage between the countries, they could do better, we could, So that type of capital and mindset of capitalists never took off that way.
That's a good point. I mean, I think if you look at most of the design of, other than these PLI schemes, which seem to be the R&D ecosystem and things that have been set up in the last 5 years, most of the programs, national programs, etc., are either about providing direct benefit or about creating infrastructure, which is a very different approach is required once you start to look at sort of really industrial policy that is globally competitive type of, and especially taking that long-term horizon. So that's clearly, I think, a view. I mean, and I think, so that is sort of the long-term view that has to be brought. And I think in the short term, like we talked immediately, we have to definitely think about, what is immediately possible to do and how we can create that, what is that bare minimum volumes we can create for the recycling sort of process to start. And then in the medium term, sort of really focusing on robotics, automation, robotics, and sort of doing it in a much more formal manner. So I think I would say those are sort of the three, strategies that have sort of emerged from our conversation. So I think that clearly becomes sort of and also I think MNRE is also very keen now on trying to create an innovation challenge around resource efficiency and circularity to also sort of really create, that set of companies that will emerge to sort of build on this, and also not sort of suffer that valley of death and really have the ecosystem support that is required for them to mainstream. So with that, I'll sort of close the session and hand it over back to Deepak, and thank you very much for all the conversation.
Thank you, Madhav. Thank you to all the panelists and Dr. Julie also in absentia. I now request Dr. Kuldeep Rana from MNRE to kindly honor the speaker. Yeah. Mr. Kunal Saxena. Mr. Vaibhav Singh. Mr. Rohit Pathak. Mr. Vivek Sharma. And Madhav. Thank you, Dr. Rana, and thank you to all of you for being a very patient audience. Thank you so much.
They'll probably take over.
We are experiencing rising temperatures and more extreme weather patterns across the globe. Yet demand for energy continues to grow across the globe. To address the climate emergency and meet the needs of society, we need to produce affordable, clean energy at scale. To do that, we need to think radically, be bold, and imagine the impossible. As one of the world's largest renewable energy companies, Adani Green Energy is determined to transition to clean energy sources quicker. Transitioning at pace isn't easy, but with our innovative approach and business philosophy shows a clear route to achieving net zero. We exist to help the world meet its net zero targets and believe doing so at scale is within our reach. Today, we're decarbonising India's grid by building the planet's largest renewable energy park in Kabra, setting a new standard for gigascale, affordable green energy production. Once complete, the renewable energy park will be as large as the city of Mumbai and 5 times the size of Paris. It'll be capable of producing an enormous 30 gigawatts of clean energy by 2030. The equivalent
Don't call me in that. Good. इसमें एक छोटे फेवर वाइट ऑरेंज कलर की बैग તમારું સામું તો છે બે વર્ષ ये एक ही लगाया है शायद से अरे आना सुंदर वांग वांग अभी आप भाव मत खाना चला पटकन
भाई मेरा गोल्डन पेन किसके पास है? गोल्डन पेन तो अभी मिलने वाला है, किसको दिया? अरे गोल्ड कलर पेन था ना, तेरे को ही दिया था मैंने।
मेरे पेन चोरी हो गया लेकिन मैं वो पेन नहीं खोला।
लोकेश को दिया था।
बैग में
नहीं बात प्रिंटर ले लो, जो भी स्टेशनरी आपके पास सही है वो सारी अपने पास जितनी इन्वेंट्री आई है वो सारी रिमोट तो टीवी कर रहे हैं ब्लेंडर मैकडॉनल्ड्स और बेली वाली रिमोट भी लेके आना
ए बाबा कल्पेश चल
मैं बोलूँ तब एक बार यहाँ बैठे
चल बाबा कई गए सारे मैसेज देखो ग्रुप पे
यहाँ पर मेरा हॉल वन में सेशन खत्म हो गया है मैं सारी चीज़ें जो है जीबी में एंटर करने आ रहा है लेकिन है ना
पड़ेगा
दो ट्रेन लेके जाना एक बार वो इसका बायोमेट्रिक रिसर्च है हाँ ये तो उसमें आ जाओ हाँ ठीक है भैया ने रहता अपना टीम में बजे ग्रुप फोटो करो सारा इवेंट जो करवा रहा है उसके ऊपर सोच देंगे सारा तो क्या है हर ऑप्शन देते हैं हर सबको हर एक ऑप्शन मिलता है अगर आपके वहाँ से आए मतलब कंपनी ही बोल सकता है चल बस भाई यहाँ से टेक्नीशियन हो जाएगा तो अपना डिमांड रखेगा मेरी सामान में लाइक चाहिए मेरे को ये सामान चाहिए और सामान यहाँ पर अवेलेबल मिलेगा नहीं फिर वो क्या बोलेगा मेरा इतना चार्ज लगेगा रेट डबल हो जाता है टेक्निकल इन्वेंट्री में ना रेट डबल हो जाता डायरी रहेगा एक पेन रहेगा और क्या रहेगा हाँ वो सब मुंह पे चला दो
The challenge of climate change affects each and every one of us. We are experiencing rising temperatures and more extreme weather patterns across the globe, yet demand for energy continues to grow across the globe. To address the climate emergency and meet the needs of society, we need to produce affordable, clean energy at scale. To do that, we need to think radically, be bold and imagine the impossible. As one of the world's largest renewable energy companies, Adani Green Energy is determined to transition to clean energy sources quicker. Transitioning at pace isn't easy, but with our innovative approach and business philosophy shows a clear route to achieving net zero. We exist to help the world meet its net zero targets and believe doing so at scale is within our reach. Today, we're decarbonising India's grid by building the planet's largest renewable energy park in Khavda, setting a new standard for gigascale, affordable green energy production. Once complete, the renewable energy park will be as large as the city of Mumbai and 5 times the size of Paris. It'll be capable of producing an enormous 30 gigawatts of clean energy by 2030, the equivalent to powering over 16 million homes. That's 16 million homes from one site, powered by solar and wind energy that nature provides in abundance.
At Adani Green Energy, we are not just setting goals. We are defining the future of sustainable energy. Adani's commitment to achieving 45 gigawatts of a renewable energy by 2030 and setting up in India the world's largest renewable energy plant is a bold testament to our dedication to a greener planet. This target is not just a number. It is our pledge to lead by example, transforming India's energy landscape and contributing significantly to the global fight against climate change. Together, we are powering a sustainable future for all.
When it comes to our own business, we uphold the highest of sustainability standards. Advanced robotic cleaning of solar panels reduces the water consumption and improves output efficiency. While it is important to focus on accelerating the energy transition today, we also know the importance of building a sustainable, equitable, and inclusive future. Through our educational partnerships, we support the delivery of quality education and providing young people with the skills they need to thrive. Powering a carbon-free world at pace isn't easy. But at Adani Green, we make it happen.
NVIDIA continues to promote renewable and storage as the new coal, EV battery and hydrogen as the new oil, the AOT network as the new grid, the net zero industry park as the new infrastructure, and an ecosystem of net zero technology as the new industry.
I'm Sajay from Zelestra India, and I come from an era where the small capacity additions in the Indian RE sector was mainly happening because of tax breaks and feed-in tariff regimes driven by the states.